marriage equality as it relates to my experience as a transsexual person. But in order to do this, I first need to give you a little bit of my own background. I was born in England in the mid-60s, and at birth I was determined to be a boy based on my anatomy. As long as I can recall, being a boy felt wrong to me, and as I was brought up in a Christian environment, when I said my prayers at night, I would also secretly include that when I woke up in the morning, I would found that my penis had fallen off, and the mistake of my birth was actually recognised that I was really a girl. But unfortunately this never happened. In 1975, when I was 10, is when my parents first found out how I was feeling about myself. My parents, not knowing what to do, took me to the doctor, and because of the medical and mental health systems at the time, I ended up spending about 6 months in a adolescent psychiatric hospital. The thing I learnt there was how to hide my feelings so deep inside myself that not even I could access them, and this in turn has taken its toll on my relationships. At the age of 17, I met the person who I consider my soulmate. We married at 20, and we soon had 3 kids. During this time, my deeply hidden feelings started to come back to the surface again. And not knowing how to handle them, I started experiencing some severe depression. But due to my fear of being readmitted to a psychiatric institution, I would not seek help. In 1977, my depression and self-worth was so bad that my partner suggested that I move out of the family home so I could decide who I was and whether gender reassignment was the right thing for my life. And as it turns out, it was. At the same time, we explained to our children what was happening and why. Though we lived separately for the following 18 months, we kept in constant contact and supported each other. But I'm sure if Deb was up here speaking today, she would say that she supported me more than I supported her. When we moved back together, we then had many challenges to face. Amongst these challenges was how various entities perceived us. Examples of this is federal government departments. If the departments recognised me as female, then they failed to recognise our marriage. If they decided to recognise our marriage, they then failed to recognise me as female. As far as state government departments were concerned, they would not recognise me as female until I was divorced. This is due to the state's Gender Reassignment Act, which states that one of the conditions for a gender recognition certificate is to be issued is that the applicant is not married. This lack of being able to receive the gender recognition has meant that it has been legal in WA to discriminate against me on the basis of my gender history. Whilst no relationship is ever perfect, the lack of recognition was one of many reasons that Deb and I separated a couple of years ago, and while we filed for and received a divorce early this year. The most surprising thing about the divorce being granted and my receiving a gender recognition certificate is that Deb and I have been able to reconcile our other differences, and we've got back together. Whilst having to get a divorce meant that, whilst I cannot say that getting a divorce, that the pressure of having to get a divorce for gender recognition certificate would have meant we had stayed together due to our other issues, I can tell you it certainly added to the pressures that we faced. Another case of transsexual marriage is known in the legal profession as the R.E. Kevin case. It's the case of Kevin, a female to male transsexual, and his partner Jennifer. In 1998, they wrote to the Attorney General asking if their proposed marriage would be legal. The response they received from the Attorney General was inconclusive. Kevin and Jennifer then found a celebrant who was willing to perform the ceremony and married in August 99. In October 99, Kevin and Jennifer applied to the family court for a declaration on the validity of their marriage. This was opposed by the Attorney General. The findings of the court, whilst very long, basically ruled the marriage was valid based on Kevin being a male at the time of the marriage. The ruling was very clear that this was not a precedent, but based on the particulars of this case. The Attorney General appealed to the full bench of the Family Court, which in 2003 upheld the original ruling. As this ruling is not a precedent, any future marriages that are undertaken by a reassigned transsexual person may need to apply for a similar ruling unless marriage equity is in place. Marriage equality will allow all transsexual people to marry if they so choose, and it will remove all doubt or questions as to the legality of that marriage. Marriage equality should also remove the government's requirement for transsexual people who are married prior to their transition to get a divorce prior to being legally recognised in their new gender. Another area where marriage equity will remove discrimination for same-sex couples is the area of immigration. Currently, a close friend of mine is in a relationship with an overseas citizen. For them to prove the relationship exists to the Department of Immigration and Citizenship, they have to be in a de facto relationship for a continuous 12 months. This becomes hard to prove when DIAC only issues visas for up to 3 months at a time. If they were a heterosexual couple, they could get engaged and DIAC would immediately recognise the relationship and consider issuing a spousal visa. As they are a same-sex couple, this option is not available to them. The couple have considered getting married overseas, but as the federal government does not recognise overseas same-sex marriages, they do not believe that this will help them stay together. Before I finish, I would like to say that last week the world lost Amber, who has been described to me as a vibrant and active young woman. Amber ended her life due to depression after facing daily battles of discrimination for being transsexual. It is disgusting that being transsexual is an area where, in most cases, you can be legally discriminated against. In WA, you must meet a specific set of criteria and be granted a gender recognition certificate in order to be covered by the anti-discrimination legislation. This means it is perfectly legal to deny employment to many transsexual people based on their gender history. It is legal to deny housing and accommodation to transsexual people based on their gender history, and this includes emergency accommodation. Schools can discriminate against transsexual staff and students based on their gender history. Transsexual people can be discriminated against in the provision of medical and counselling services based on their gender history. And there are many other areas where it is legal to discriminate against a person based on their gender history. Once again, transsexual and transgender people in WA are only protected from this discrimination if they meet the requirements of the Gender Reassignment Act and have been issued a gender reassignment certificate. The most prevalent form of discrimination against transsexual people is where others deliberately choose to address us in our previous name or gender. I'm not talking about where people make genuine mistakes in using your old name or the wrong pronouns, and after all this time, people that have known me most of my life still make mistakes. But unfortunately, there's people who, when finding out your gender history, deliberately use your old name or the wrong pronouns or even refer to you as it in a deliberate attempt to insult us. This is other areas where we need protection. We need to stop all forms of discrimination, and we need to stop it now. If the issues that I've discussed today, both marriage equality and transsexual discrimination, were about race or religion, there will be a massive outcry. But because it's considered to only affect a minority of people, then it seems that a lot of people feel it is okay to discriminate. I will say I find it quite disgusting that one of the biggest arguments against marriage equality is based on religious beliefs. As I believe in Australia today, it is against the law to discriminate against people based on religion. I'm not saying that religious organisations should be forced to perform same-sex marriages. At the moment, they currently have the prerogative not to perform marriages for any person that asks them. And I believe that this prerogative of churches and ministers should continue. After all, I would rather have someone conduct my ceremony that wanted to be there than someone that was forced to. Thank you.